Okay, welcome again to another Bob the Father. This is kind of an open forum. Any questions that I ask, I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. So, who wants to begin?
So inquiring minds want
Yeah,
to know.
yeah,
We just had your installation
right,
over the weekend, and it was packed.
yeah,
And I'm looking up on the altar, and there are tons of priests and
yeah,
just people up there in your support. And there was a guy with a big
yeah,
furry beard,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I was wondering, who is that?
Okay, good. So actually, I didn't know what the protocol was. I mean, for this because I'm actually the first one in my class to be installed as pastor. And I don't know, I've never been, I think, to a first pastor's installation, so I didn't really know like what that entails. And so I actually invited like 30 other priests, like priests who were influential in my formation, in my priesthood so far, including those who are in my fraternity group. So the ones that were there, other than Father Vincent, of course, and Father Jones, who is the presider, he's our Episcopal vicar, Monsignor Joe Simon, who I lived 4 years with over at St. Gabriel, and also was he's actually been the rector at the new cathedral, and he just retired when he retired, and I got ordained. We just ended up at St. Gabriel at the same time. So he retired there, and I had my first assignment there. So wonderful man, good man, a great friend, a lot of wisdom. The other one next to him was Monsignor Jim Ramacati. So the St. Anne people would know Monsignor Ramacati. His first assignment was actually here at St. Anne. He was his first assignment as associate pastor. He taught me canon law in the seminary. So you would imagine canon law would be very, very boring. Not with him. He is probably one of the best classes in the seminary is the canon law, and probably just because he's teaching it. So he's a great teacher, a great mentor, a great friend. The other gentleman that was there on the other side of the sanctuary on the bench with me his name is Father Chris Smith. So Father Chris Smith and I, we entered the seminary he was about a year behind me, but we started discerning about the same time. And the first time we really met each other was at a discernment retreat at the seminary. And it just so happened a couple years later, we both lived in what they call the Colby House. So for those who don't know, the Archdiocese off and on has had this program through the Office of Vocations where men who have had a career, had some other experience, maybe if they're trying to pay off debt or discern further whether they're being called to the priesthood, they can live in community with other guys who are doing the same to maybe get used to the fact of going to the seminary, but also maybe kind of complete that discernment. Or maybe just pay off their debt until they're ready to actually enter the seminary. Father Chris Smith and I were one of those, along with Father Chris Ruby. So we all got ordained, which is really cool. Father Ruby was a paralegal, and he got a master. Actually, he got his degree in philosophy, which was kind of fascinating. Father Smith is actually a doctor. He's actually a pharmacist. So when we met, he was still completing his college, and then of course I was an engineer. So we lived there with Father Chris Martin, who was a vocation director at the time, and this was at the St. Mary and Joseph Church down in South City. So kind of close to my old neighborhood, which is kind of nice coming home in some ways. And so we all kind of entered around the same time, and we're all the same fraternity group. And so Father Chris is actually a convert to Catholicism. His home parish is St. Joe Cotterville. A lot of vocations come out of Cotterville for some reason. I don't know. It's just so huge. That could be it. It's a numbers game. Yeah, it's a numbers game. Yeah, right. Yeah. Really. As Mayor Patrick, our seminarian, is also from Cotterville too. So no, it was really just a really good house. It was really helpful in kind of like getting used to community life with those three guys, and we would pray every night together, and if we could in the morning, have mass together. Right. So that was, I think, kind of an experience because I was putting certain things in the freezer, which really
like milk. And things
like fresh vegetables.
Yeah,
it's
okay,
well, all right, cool, whatever. Yeah. And so it's like, all right, fine.
Well, to make it even worse, you guys don't have a cook.
Right.
I mean, if you were living in a parish where at least they had a cook, you wouldn't have to deal with so much of that stuff either.
Yeah, and I was approached by this last in the spring. He has a friend over at Sacred Heart, Father Bill's parish, and Father Bill kind of reached out. It's like, hey, I was like, well, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, if anything, just having a presence in the rectory here would be good. I can't be both places at once, and so I was even discerning, like even beforehand, like going back and forth, like living in both rectories in some way, like maybe like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday here, and then I don't know. I know there's some people who are not very happy with me for not living in this rectory.
Oh.
And it's like, well, sorry, I don't know. I mean,
I think
You can't please all the
Oh,
people.
I know.
all
I
the
think
know.
it's
time.
good. I think
I
it's
know.
good.
I
for-
think it's great that you're
good
in
for you.
presentation.
well, I agree, and I think personally, with me, it's like when I was working for Boeing, I didn't do this well, but at least I had the opportunity to shut it off.
Yeah,
Right.
right. I mean,
No,
no.
yeah.
And
So here, I think you look at it that way is that after I leave here, and here's the thing people don't realize: I'm usually over in this rectory for like 12, 13 hours a day.
Yeah, sure. You're
Like
upstairs.
I'm not,
Well, and you've made yourself so available. I mean, the times I've called you, you normally answer your phone, and if not, you get back within a little bit. It's
I
not
always
like
try to
you're-
get back within 24 hours.
It's not like you're out
Yeah.
hiding or
No,
something,
right, right. And I mean, it's one of those things where like I want to be available with people.
And maybe that's a little bit of insecurity in people thinking, well, if he's not
Oh,
staying
sure.
here, maybe something else is going to
Sure,
happen we don't
sure.
know about.
Yeah,
And that's scary. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
anytime a parish has been through an experience like everybody has been with the different changes, you're still nervous about what's going to happen.
And I will say, like, I understand that because I had a meeting a couple weeks ago, which we'll talk about parish council as well as finance council coming up in the next few months. We had a discussion about relegation of churches. So just for those who don't know, what that means is it's reducing the church from what they call sacred to profane but not sordid use.
Okay.
So like colloquially what that means is make secular use, right? So like, you can make it into like a bakery or hotel or something, that kind of thing. But it can't be used for like, I don't know, some of the priests were kind of joking around, like, well, can you sell it like as a weed,
Like,
so-
dispensary or not, right?
Yeah, there's still a moral question about that, I guess. So that would be maybe considered
Well,
sordid.
and the thing is the church at presentation is such a church.
I know
It's
it'd
not
be hard to do anything else with that.
when
right? Yeah.
when I was over in St. Anne when we had like St. Kevin's. Now Rittner just bought the
Right.
campus over there, and they're in there right now doing a bunch of work. But it was still basically just a block building, and it was a church that was never meant to be a permanent church.
Right.
It
Well,
was
see,
always going to be a gym.
that was
when
one
we
thing.
build the real church,
Right.
this is going to be a gym.
That was actually an example they brought up this meeting.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
so what they were really trying to express is that as we've experienced all things new, there were some changes that were introduced by Rome to make it more difficult.
Oh.
And that was for a reason. I mean, so in other words, I think it was sort of a check and balance to ensure that this was done in a way that was discerned well, right? And so what was actually kind of fascinating about that is what some of the examples they were using, and what I thought was kind of interesting was some of the responses that came back.
See people using it for a church again.
Right.
It is nice to,
Right.
see even a different faith. It's like, okay, at least somebody's finding
He's
a
using it,
place
right.
here,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, but also too, I think that's also the reason why the Rome is making it so difficult because they don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
They want these churches to be Catholic churches.
Yeah.
And so, and you have to have a very, really, great reason to say that we can't do this.
Was that a Catholic church that they turned into the skateboard?
Yeah,
park?
St. Laborious.
Yeah, and that was kind of
Well, even not in my neighborhood, St. Boniface
Was the
was
same
turned
deal.
into a theater.
Okay.
And even then, they had to be very clear about what they could show in the theater and all. I mean,
Okay.
still being run there as a theater, but it's
Make
also
some
like,
contingencies.
yeah.
on
But I
that.
mean, but also just it's like that's St. Boniface.
Yeah.
Like it's weird,
Yeah.
that it's not
For
St.
so many
Boniface.
people, that was home for their
Right.
whole life, and it's
Right.
like, okay,
And I don't know, I'm a little more detached, I guess. I grew up in a parish where even though I had all my first sacraments there, the beauty of it was not really conducive for worship. So the fact it got subsumed, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Fine. When whatever Father Nord does with the church, I mean, hey, I get it. I'm in the same boat. I understand where you're coming from. But yeah, I think that's the thing is that, but even those circumstances, that also was never meant to be. It was always going to be a permanent church, and so you can't use the old. Well, this is an old gym church, and it was a gym, and I converted it, and we're good. Well, you can't use that argument on some of these places.
When we were at that funeral Friday, two of my brothers were there, and they're like, we were at lunch afterwards talking. They go, the place looks exactly like it did when we were kids 50 years ago. I said, there's some same tile on the floor.
Well, the tabernacle knew.
Well, I know. Well, except when
it was great when you were there.
when
Still
we were
there.
kids, the long altar was still in the back.
Right.
It wasn't being used
Right.
anymore, but it was always up on the big
Right,
altar.
right.
Yeah, but we never did fix figure out when it got moved down to the side.
Well, you know, I think what they wanted to do, and this is, I think what the plan was, they were going to put a chapel in there eventually.
I got you.
I mean,
Turn
put
that
the, yeah,
into
turn
a
the kind of
small
chapel,
space.
right?
Yeah, that's-
But I think this never came to fruition. So
yeah.
yeah,
I always kind of thought that would be a real neat place to have a 50-person chapel.
right.
When we were at Trinity, we took one of the classrooms in the school building and literally turned it into a small chapel.
We do
Great.
that at
Yeah,
presentation.
great
Yeah.
for 30 people
Yeah,
on
many,
weekday
many
mornings.
schools do that too.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, they
really
put chapel,
nice.
yeah.
I mean, and
Right.
you didn't turn the heat on in the church
Right.
all week, and
Right. Yeah.
right down
Um,
the line.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
No, it
mean,
definitely saves with that kind of thing.
with the screwy system is here, because of the fact that the boiler, the heat comes out of the school.
Right.
There's only one
Right.
boiler here.
Right.
And people are always like, well, why is the blower blowing when it's cold? Well, you turn the blower on, but if the boiler's not working over
It's
in the
not
school,
right.
there's no hot water to make it warm.
Make it warm.
Pipes are all under.
Correct.
Yeah,
They go.
yeah.
There's a tunnel that goes under.
Yeah, it
the
actually
street.
comes in right over
It's-
down here,
yeah.
over here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's there's a large air handler here that takes, the air conditioners for here are on the roof, but for some reason, when they built this, they decided, let's use the same boiler for both places, which in one respect, obviously, there's enough hot water to heat the whole
Right,
place.
right.
But on the other hand, when it goes out, everything,
Yeah,
instead of having two different buildings,
Mm-hmm.
there'll be one or the other. Yeah, it's just, but people feel that cold air blowing on a morning,
Yeah,
on a cold,
yeah.
cooler morning in the fall, and they don't understand that there's not going to be any heat coming out.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna kick in the heat around November 1st.
Yeah.
So that was the transition usually.
And the other part about it is, and I still remember this from being a kid, that church, by the time 11 o'clock mass rolls around, has the best air conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It is to a
Oh.
point where you almost wear a coat to 11 o'clock.
Are you talking about at presentation?
No, here.
Oh, here, yeah, here. I don't have a bed for you or anything. Oh, I know. Can you call? So I called 411 or 211,
Yeah.
and they were no help.
Oh, really?
Like, we're all booked. You can try back at 10. I'm like, well, if you're booked now at 9, why?
Yeah,
why
it's not
so
going to
I was
probably
like,
get
all
any
right.
better, is it?
So I was like, I don't know what to do. It's like, can I just sit here? I'm like, I mean, I brought her some food out, but I was just like, I don't. Finally, I just, those are, I usually just call, because she was saying something about she's being chased and threatened. And then you're sort of thinking, like, okay, what's going on up here? And
Yeah.
so I just ended up calling the police.
That's the unfortunate part about an awful lot of those homeless
Mhm.
folks have got mental things going
Well,
on.
where the shipment said, well, I have money. I'm like, okay. It was such a weird
It was just-
conversation. And, oftentimes, especially with homeless, when I get in those conversations, they purposely try to mix the facts to kind of like, confuse you.
Yeah.
So that way they can kind of get what they want. Now, she never really did that here. So that's why I kind of thought she was, but then the police said, well, we checked her and she seemed fine. I'm like, well, I don't know what you asked her, but when I was talking,
Yeah.
here's what she was saying. So I don't know.
And you always second guess yourself.
Right.
Any of those confrontations, we've all had them, and you
But
just
then-
hear.
But then they said, well, we'll be okay if she stays here the night. I'm like, look, I'm not saying no. I mean, the doors are locked. I'm fine. But like, you think that's safe? Like, well, we have nothing else. We can't do anything else with her. I'm like, all right. She's like, what time do you need her out of here by? I'm like, well, we have mass tomorrow at 8 and confession at 7:30. Okay, we'll come back at 7. Make sure she's. I'm like, why not just do that now?
Yeah.
It was very odd.
Yeah, it's a dilemma. It's something that, the governments refuse to deal with it.
Mhm.
They're just like, I used to always think it was the city. You're always reading about Larry Rice and all his stuff,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
as crazy a guy as he always seemed, he got right down to it.
He did, but
And
also
did.
he had caused some other problems.
Well, yeah,
too,
he was, but I do give him some credit though for what he did do. I mean, he at least tried to. But
Father, is there a public restroom here anymore since the?
No.
I'm sorry. Yeah, everybody's living upstairs now.
they're out there playing soccer. I think the concession.
Yeah, the
stand-
concession stand is bad.
There's one at the concession
Oh,
stand
is
over
there?
at the field. Yeah,
So they're saying there's one at the concession stand.
yeah, there should be, and they usually have that open when you have practice
No,
over
I
there.
don't know. They said it was closed.
Oh.
Now, see, that's something that shouldn't be. If you got soccer practice going on,
Yeah,
you should have a
yeah.
bathroom open. and that's
How dare
kind of,
humans
Well-
have to go to
well, when I
that?
go to a men's club meeting, we're gonna have to, we'll talk about
Yeah,
it. I mean,
right.
no, seriously.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right. It's a good point.
I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's a little deal. I mean, when you gotta go to bed, you gotta go to
Gotta go to the
bed. I
bathroom.
mean, we all can live with that, but.
Oh, yeah, no, with the homeless thing is that's
Yeah.
I mean, we even had apparently there's a gentleman that was camping out here in the pavilion, and not work. The bus does not work. We're trying to we'll get rid of that pretty soon, but
Yeah.
that's been also an issue there. But yeah, it's that's happening everywhere.
Yeah,
You know,
and it's,
unfortunately.
yeah, and it's not just, it's all over. It's not the same,
And truly, I mean, I honestly don't have a problem with people camping out on the front porch in the rectory.
Yeah.
But it's also just like, when does it become problematic?
We don't want an encampment though.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
what seems to happen. You
Right.
get 3, 4, 5 people, and then
Right.
I was thinking about your little courtyard up
Yeah.
there. I could picture.
I'm actually more surprised there hasn't been more people just like
I mean,
posting up shop there.
because it's sheltered from
Right.
the wind because
Right.
it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
and it's
It was like diapers and ointment and stuff for like children. It's like, okay, we get out. I mean, it was like maybe $100 worth of groceries. I'm like, cool, whatever, fine. Yeah, I mean, it would be like, I should get you to Chicago. Great.
yeah.
Good luck. Hope your mom's fine. Next day,
Mm.
her sister came up to me
No.
because I saw her. She was next to the van. They were sitting. I was like, I think is that your sister over there? Yeah. I just gave you a lot yesterday. What happened to Chicago? He walks away. I'm like,
Yeah, that was the end of the,
Okay.
end of the story there.
good
Yeah.
talk. Yeah.
Nah, it's tough. It's hard to figure,
But do you wonder what they do with all that stuff? I mean, they just keep it in the van. They try to
I mean,
resell it. I don't know.
We will never have to go to confession for being taken advantage of.
That's very
So
true.
Let's just.
That's a
very
good
true.
point. You're
That's very
right.
true.
I try to judge in a practical way,
Mhm.
So like when the 4 or 5 gentlemen all are wearing their t-shirts and they have their little slips of paper in their buckets and they are doing it for the homeless.
Yeah.
If I have money, I'd give it to them.
You got to be careful with those sometimes, though, too.
They seem organized. They seem
They
like
do.
they seem like
They
they're
do.
the right thing.
But so do the people at Highway 40 and Kings Highway, too.
Well,
You're right.
I
You're
was
right.
going
Well,
to
this
ask
is
about.
what Paige and
Okay, they got
Woodson?
purple shirts on.
Yeah, they got the purple
Okay.
shirts and they give you the thing.
We're yeah. I that's been going on for years.
is
It
that
really
am I
has.
being taken?
I don't know, Connie, because it's been going on for a minimum of 5 years.
Yeah.
And
But
it's usually a Page and Ashby, Page and Woodson.
Yeah.
Now,
And
to be
here's
fair,
what I
fair,
think.
they may have like a pantry or something running.
Well,
you don't know.
every time
Except-
I give them something, they give me the slip of paper to
Did
put
they?
in my windshield. Just
Yes.
like the guys
So
used
you
to
can
do with
warn the
bodies.
other guy.
So when you're pulling up to the next
Right.
light, they go,
Oh,
oh, things are good.
okay.
So that's
Okay.
where I was thinking.
You know,
about
Yeah, it's
safety.
probably, it could be legit. Yeah, well,
But
I know there have been some out there, which just like
Here,
it's just a racket,
I know we're in Normandy School District here at St. Anne, but over in Rittner School District, if you live in the parameters of the Rittner School District, Rittner Food Pantry is over at, help me there, Connie, Midland and Woodson,
Yeah,
at that old school.
right.
And they run a top-notch
Yeah, they
food
really
pantry.
do.
I mean, they will take care of you. So anybody in the boundaries of Rittner School District can go there. As long as you've got a license or something
Okay.
that says you live in there, and they're open every day. It's like almost like a grocery store. And some days they have, I call it specials. I mean, if they get like a pallet of potatoes come in,
yeah.
nobody goes out the door without
Right.
a bag of potatoes,
That's awesome,
things
yeah. like
that. But they're really set up. But it's kind of interesting now that I've been here and I've kind of gotten to know Mel and know how they run Vincent de Paul. They actually run Vincent de Paul like it was meant to be run.
Right.
We had Holy Trinity. We had a food pantry that was probably serving 70, 80 people a week. But the problem was they got to be like a government agency. You had to sit down at a desk and bring paperwork.
Yeah.
And that's not what Vincent de Paul.
Right.
Vincent de Paul is supposed to be.
Well, I do know the reason they do that because I know that St. Patrick and Wentzville they do the same
Okay,
thing.
same deal.
But the reason they do is because some of the food they get is from the government,
And it's got to be.
and it has to be
It's gotta
done
have
that way. Yeah, that's
documentation.
so they do sue them food regardless.
I know.
But the food that comes from the government, they have to make sure they meet the criteria.
But I miss the fact that when I got involved with Vincent de Paul in the early '80s when we had it over at St. Kevin's, the home visits were so good
Yeah.
because you went to people's houses and you connected
Right.
with them, and you didn't just hand them 2 bags of groceries and walk away. You went
Wonder
and
if they're
talked
going to be okay.
Well, and you got to know them, and honestly, you went in there and you were sitting there and they were watching TV, and you would say, you know, I've always felt extra sorry for people who were mentally.
Yeah.
He was institutionalized for 40
Right.
years.
Right.
This is a guy. I grew up next door to this guy, and he died 4 years ago.
Right.
And they had him
2020.
right at the beginning of pandemic, and they were spread all over the country.
Right.
2 of the girls live in New York, and they never got around to having a funeral for him. So they finally decided to have this funeral, and it was like, oh my God, that's ironic. And
Better late than never.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, at least you had it good.
Yeah.
You know, great.
Yeah.
I think, well, it's funny too. I think people tend to don't realize either that the funeral rite is actually a continuous rite. There's no like set time frame on it. It starts with the death of the person and it doesn't end until the interment. And everything within it is really kind of optional.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even the mass, people tend to like freak out like about. It's like, well, the mass is optional. You don't have to have a funeral mass.
Oh, don't. So you can actually do a ceremony that's like a blessing
Yeah,
ceremony for you. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's
I mean,
interesting.
as a matter of fact, lay people can do most of the rites.
Oh, really?
The only thing you need a priest for is the mass itself. And the rite actually differentiates between lay people and clergy.
Okay.
So like there's particular prayers that a clergy would say rather than a lay person. But yeah, the rite, if you get the right book, it kind of points all those things out.
I went to a funeral for my brother-in-law, her brother-in-law. Fallen away Catholic, the whole family, you know. So they had the preacher, I guess the contract preacher was one of the funeral homes in St. Charles, and they have contract preachers. And this guy was Australian, gentleman about 65, 70 years old, did a very nice service, a couple nice readings. And so near the end of it, he with that wonderful Australian accent, he goes, and we can all pray together, let's pray the Our Father. So everybody in the room bows out the Our Father. He goes, I love doing Catholics' funerals because you folks know how to say the Our Father. Because I guess they don't say it in Protestant churches. But he made a very specific point to say that. He goes, I can tell this room's full of Catholics.
Well, it's also interesting, too, they don't call it the rite of Catholic burial, it's the rite of Christian burial. Most all denominations follow those same rites, you know. I mean, other than the Mass, of course.
Now,
but yeah.
Am I right about one thing, Father, that you're not supposed to be scattering the ashes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So when we talk about the cremains, okay, so there were some.
I know cremation's a fairly new thing for Catholics, right?
I mean, it's been around since the 1920s.
Okay,
but for Catholics, I mean, yeah, it is fairly recent.
Seems like the last 20 or 30 years, it's become a pretty standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna talk about this a little bit more in November as we talk about the month of the dead, maybe looking at sort of like the rites themselves. But like, yeah, but just briefly. Because there's such respect and dignity given to the body, right? We want to do everything we can to retain the remains of the body because of mostly for veneration.
Yeah.
Right. So, when someone dies, we don't know if they're a saint or not, right? If they're in heaven or not. And if they're in heaven, we should show due respect and veneration to those relics that which they are now, right? And so because of that, we want to make sure they're actually, you know, contained in the proper way. So people can say, well, yeah, but can't you put a memorial out and scatter? Like, well, you know, the problem with that is you don't know where the ashes go, right? Once it rains,
totally agree.
I mean, they're just gone now, right? They're spread out all over the place. And one can say, well, wait, but can God bring back your body? Well, yeah, of course God can, but that's not the point. The problem is that's not showing due respect and dignity to the body, right? So what the church has actually come out recently, though, with some directives about it is licit, they would say, to take some cremains in a body. Control. Like so, we have places of mixed cremains where.
Gotcha.
So because of this, and a lot of this comes in what they call the vox populi, right? So the voice of the people, and the people start doing a practice, and the church says like, okay, well, what can we do here?
Let's adapt to that.
Right, yeah. Can we?
It isn't exactly what we want.
Exactly. Can we do something here though to make it to lift the burden of these things? And so this, I think, was a way that we can look at what the church teaches and say, okay, here's what we can be done, but the intention always has to be there's some kind of interment. Yeah. Right. And whether that happens at your own death, and you put in your will that grandma needs to be buried with me or whatever. Okay. Yeah. But that needs to happen eventually at some point.
Somebody was this brother-in-law that just died my wife's sister died last year. Now, this is something I thought was different. The kids mix the two ashes together.
Yeah, that's allowed now.
Okay, it is actually
Yeah,
allowed.
the
Well, I'm going
church
to tell
allows it.
Rose
So
that because that'll make her feel
yeah, but
better.
it still has to be interred regardless.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
okay.
But okay, I never heard of that before.
Yeah,
Oh my God, that's got to be a good.
So there's certain things that are like kind of like beyond the pale. So for instance, there's one process now that is becoming popular because it's more of a green way.
Oh,
It's called hydrology.
yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
it's
Now
kind
the
of-
problem with that is most of the remains are not compressed into this powder. They're pitched into the
They've moved
sewer.
on down the sewer. Yeah, haven't
And
they?
so we would say that would not show due
Yeah.
respect to the human
Yeah.
body.
They got to figure out a way to keep everything together
Right.
if they want to do that.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah. Or what you see now too is, and this is kind of I think part of the movement is people are making the cremains into like jewelry and stuff, and it's sort of like,
Nah.
yeah, you know, people lose jewelry all the time,
Yeah.
and so is
that's
it good that you lost grandma at the rock concert?
Yeah.
I was on the roller coaster.
Yeah, right. Like, well,
It's kind
you
of
know.
ironic because a friend, when my wife died 17 years ago, I had a couple dozen roses on the casket. At the end of the service, when we were done at the cemetery, Father said, if anybody wants to please take a rose as a memory. Well, these folks took 2 or 3 of them, and they had a rosary made out of them.
oh,
The
those are flowers.
roses, not the
Oh,
not
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
remains,
No, that's great,
but
yeah.
the roses. And I got, oh my God, what a wonderful thing!
That's
So
beautiful.
I would love to find out
That's
if you get
awesome.
that.
They
That's
had
what
it
I'm on.
done
Well,
down
I
in
know that
Alabama.
the
That's where they
sisters
had
at
it done.
Carondelet,
Okay.
on
St. Joseph
Clayton
Carmelite?
Road, no,
Oh, the Carmelites.
Carmelites.
Yeah.
They took the roses from a friend of mine's child's death and
Oh.
made the rosary out of it.
Okay.
And I have bought rosaries that were made out of rose
I thought
petals.
that was it's
It's a dumb thing.
I don't actually use it. I've got
you
it
can
on
smell
display.
them.
Oh,
When
that's
I was in France, somewhere in Paris, at one of the shrines, I don't remember which one, La Verre, and I bought a number of rosaries.
Rosaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So it's not that uncommon.
Okay.
Well,
That
my
sounds
mom
pretty
had
awesome.
one years
Yeah.
and years ago.
I saw
And when my
some.
mom passed, I kept her roses, and I have them today. I don't know where to get them made. So now, kind of
Well,
like somewhere down the south side, I'll be looking.
Well, they're on Clayton
No,
Road.
On
They have a
Clayton Road.
monastery
Now,
out
I
there in
know
Clayton.
that they got the rosary made for
Somewhere.
Michelle, but I
Okay.
don't know if
Well,
they
it's-
did it.
my
They
mom
may do it
has
in-house, I don't
years.
know.
You know what?
It's-
You check a couple of jewelers. I bet somebody knows where that
Well,
is.
you
Yeah.
know, you can always Google it.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
in today's world.
Well,
Yeah.
very
So-
good.
The other story I had on the remains is the fact that now I know when I signed a contract for our cemetery lots, if you don't put in the Catholic cemeteries now, if you don't put the casket in a concrete,
We need to breathe. We need to eat. We need to, procreate, whatever. Not all of us, but some do. Okay, so having a healthy attachment to certain things would be a temporal attachment. So for instance, I'm hungry. I can eat this apple, or I can have this ice cream sundae. Which shows more of a temporal attachment, the ice cream sundae or the apple? Well, obviously, eating the ice cream sundae is more of a temporal attachment, right? There's not a lot of sacrifice in that. I mean,
There's not a lot of goodness for your body.
exactly
There's
right.
not a
All
lot of
nutrition. So in other words,
nutrition, there's a- yeah.
it may not be sinful for me to eat that sundae, but it wouldn't be the best thing to do in the circumstance I find myself. Okay, so being free of those type of things. So in other words, maybe I really, really want the sundae. I'm going to choose the apple instead to be detached from it.
Just a one-time shot or 24-hour?
Well, okay, so that's the thing, right? So at the time to receive the indulgence, you have to be free of it. Now, to reap the benefit of it, right, the person that you're doing it for has to meet that same criteria. So, for instance, if let's say I'm doing it for my mom, well, okay, I can do all that stuff for her, but if she's not in that state to receive it, well, she may receive a partial, but she wouldn't receive the full indulgence. That may go to somebody else. God, in God's good justice and time and mercy, He'll provide for that. So it's not going to go to waste.
so does that mean you're supposed to tell the person that?
Well, so
easier
here's
to sell
why.
at church.
Here's why it's probably better to do it for somebody in purgatory. because they're more disposed at that moment to receive it
Okay.
well,
That makes sense.
right? So, because here's the thing, even if it was someone before living, once I start having that attachment, well, the plenary portion is now gone anyway, too. Even if they weren't in a state to receive it, the factors are both and, right? Whereas souls in purgatory are in that state now to receive it.
Yeah.
They're not eating ice cream.
Yeah, right.
No, they're not eating ice
So
cream.
it's
You're
probably,
right.
that's why we would say you
Yeah.
can do it for anybody,
Okay.
but it's probably best to do it for somebody who is passed.
And you don't have to name them.
No, you have to know. You'd have to know who it is.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
can't just say for the poor souls in
You can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that. Sure. Yeah, and let God just say, okay, God, it's your call. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
You won the lottery.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the indulgence is really that remission of that the punishment comes from our sin, and so
Okay.
especially those who are in purgatory receiving that now, they'll benefit the most from it, because once that is applied to them.
So you figure when you die, they're all going to line up and say, thank you.
Well, I imagine, in some way, whatever that means, you know.
Hopefully that's your
Yeah.
reception.
Yeah.
committee, right?
I mean, here's the thing: you probably wouldn't even need it at that point. The things because great.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that was the whole thing. Is the whole thing there when Martin Luther kind of came about? His whole argument was about the selling. He was right, but the church never actually promulgated that,
So,
and it changed it.
okay, so Martin Luther was right. So now today we have sort of the same situation. There goes my mind. The cardinal or the Archbishop Vigano.
Yeah, excommunicated.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I mean, he has come out. I mean, I was shocked, but on one of my Catholic Facebook things, there he was, and he must have had a 5-minute talk about how wrong Pope Francis is. And I
don't know.
it's like if I'm Catholic, I have to follow the.
it is. So Martin Luther, there was a few factors with him. It was just indulgences. One thing that he was, he was more influenced by the people he was around. So what was going on at the time Martin Luther, especially in Germany, was you had these German princes who were asked by the Holy Father to contribute money to the building of the St. Peter's Basilica. And they didn't want to do that because why want my money? Well, hey, here's this Augustinian priest who's kind of revolting out against the Pope. Let's get behind him. So before that happened, Martin Luther was actually like talking about how, the people in power need to repent and turn back to God, and maybe give some what they have to the poor and help those that are under their charge to kind of like lift themselves up and kind of receive some of the goods that they're receiving. Well, after these German princes got into him, he started changing his tone. It was like, oh, well, these people are put here by God, and it's really their decision how they want to do things. And, that's when you start seeing maybe more change in theology. Like, hey, there's these 7 books of this Bible here that are really supporting things that maybe are not in line with my understanding of faith alone or my understanding of the sacraments. And, in reality, I think there's only like 3 sacraments. Maybe there's baptism and Eucharist, and then maybe confession. But these other ones, they're good, but they're not, there really is no such thing as a priesthood. We're all priests in the fact that we're baptized. And, marriage, you look at the old, this practice of celibacy doesn't really make a lot of sense because we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. So all that was just sort of like a change based on this influence of these German princes. And so he finally was invited to Rome by Pius V. And Pius was trying to approach him as sort of like a fatherly pastoral way and be like, look, we love you. Once you come back, you guys stop doing this. But if anyone knew anything about Martin Luther, he really responded more towards power. And he had a very strict morality to the point where he was a daily confessor. And he would confess anything. And so some critique that Pius V, if he were a little more heavy-handed with him, you might not have a Lutheran church today. But one thing that he did witness in Rome was a lot of the decadence that the clergy was receiving, and the other things that were going on, which was not only just immoral, but also against church teaching. And so that kind of, he kind of thought the church was uncorrupt. Now, you have to understand, the church never condoned any of these things. And the church did reform after Trent because of these things. And right, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things going on here that's not in line
not
with
right.
what our
We need
way
to
of life.
clean-
We need to
clean
clean
it
up.
Yeah.
And they did. But his own obstinance kept him from coming back because he's receiving influence and power and other things from these German princes. Why? Okay, I can start my own church now.
Yeah, he was
Life is
a
good.
pretty big shot all of a sudden, wasn't he?
I mean, but it happened before he did. I mean, the first one to really turn away was Henry VIII.
Yeah, well, that was,
He was the first one.
Right.
But if you look at all these reasons why these, not only were they actually they all set up by Catholic clergy, they were really more political things than they were theological things.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the same way with Vagano, I mean, if you look at him right now, it's sort of like, okay, look, you can critique the Pope. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But nothing that he has said or done as the Pope has been heretical or contrary to what the church teaches.
is this I'm not familiar with this.
Archbishop Vagano was the papal nuncio of the United States under Benedict.
Okay.
He, after Pope Francis rose to the throne, Vagano started this kind of process of finding fault to the point now where he's been excommunicated.
Wow. Okay.
So he basically is a sedevacantist. He is basically saying the chair is open. The see of Peter does not have a shepherd,
Oh, really?
and Francis is an illegitimate pope.
When I still remember the day I was at the lunch table at work and the thing came on about Francis becoming Pope. And as soon as I heard he was a Jesuit, I said, oh boy, this next 10, 15 years. and a couple of the guys I work with are very non-religious, don't have a background. They're like, what do you mean? Jesuits, well, it's kind of been bad boys. I said, I didn't have a good comparison at the time to put there, but I said, it's going to be interesting. You'll hear more on the, just on the news.
But the point there with him is that it's sort of he is causing division among Christ's church, and that's why he's been excommunicated. Right. And so here's the thing: it's fair to say, he said this to a bunch of reporters, and he said this stuff to the synod, and that seems like kind of crazy. Okay, but he's not saying it as the Pope.
He's not
unless
making this an official.
Unless he writes it down and says, "I, as successor of Peter, and you with the other bishops, in the line with teaching of the church, hereby declare this." Yeah. I don't care. I don't. I'm sorry. It's not going to have any impact on my life whatsoever.
So what the Pope says in the backseat of an airplane while he's flying across the ocean,
it is not infallible.
Not official either.
It's not infallible. It is not a church teaching. Yeah. It's an opinion of Mario Bergoglio, who is known as Pope Francis. And he can give any opinion he wants. And here's the other thing, too. Other popes have done that. Yeah. He's not the first. He probably be the last. Every pope has something they said that was really matter their opinion that was not part of church teaching. Okay. Move on.
They're human.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be reassured.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad. I feel bad for Archbishop Vagano. I wonder if he's going through some mental decline too. I don't know.
Well, that is an early sign of dementia when they start doing this.
Well, to me, it's something where you've been a priest and bishop for this long.
Yeah.
And now, what?
It doesn't make, it's very hard if you're a strong Catholic.
Of course. Because I imagine with Archbishop Vagano, he does uphold a lot of the teaching of the church, good teaching of the church. Yeah. And that's what a good archbishop should. But the problem is, well, you're no longer the Pope. Whoa. Based on what? Well, you said this to a reporter. So?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
You can say you can say this may be a Peter and Paul moment, but you also realize too, Paul didn't set up his own church.
Yeah.
He didn't. He may have critiqued Peter and talked to Peter and lambasted him. He didn't leave though.
But he went along with the program.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're really a true shepherd, a true bishop, that's what you should do.
Well, doesn't that the whole line of succession of obedience and just like you're obedient to the bishop here in St. Louis and right on up the line.
Here's the thing: if I don't agree with Archbishop Rossancy, I'm not making that public. Sorry, I'm not.
You can think that all you
right. First, I'm not doing that.
it's just like,
And at least I won't do it before I actually have a discussion with him,
yeah.
Right.
right?
But yeah. And quite frankly, he's not asking you. If
No,
you
he sure
agree with
doesn't.
it.
And nor should he. Right, exactly.
You
Right.
may be feeling way too self.
Oh yeah, if he wants my opinion, I'm happy to give it to him, but I know he doesn't want it. So okay, great, I'm fine with that. That's no skin off my nose. He's got a lot on his shoulders. I get it more than I do.
I guess
so,
that's some of the bad part about the media and stuff, and the fact that I know I keep telling my wife, she's always watching all this stuff on YouTube. I said, just be careful when you turn this stuff on.
That's
and there's
good
a lot of
advice.
great stuff on
That's
there, and
good
it's
advice.
not. But when you hear somebody start pontificating
Right.
and it doesn't sound quite right, check the credits, see what's written on there, and if it seems to be coming from a legitimate Catholic
well,
order.
there's two things probably to keep in mind when it comes to these things. First off, there's no imprimatur and nihil obstat on YouTube videos.
Yeah, right. There's no
Run
such
that
thing.
by
Right?
me. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. So when something is usually promoted or promulgated in writing by a Catholic person, what many Catholic authors, many theologians do is that what they do is they go to their local bishop.
Okay.
And what the local bishop will do is stamp it and say, this is nihil obstat, meaning there's nothing obstinate against the faith.
I've checked this reading.
Right, and the imprimatur is saying, I'm officially sealing that there's nothing in contrary to the faith or that could be considered detrimental to faith in this book.
Okay.
Right? Now, there have been books with the nihil obstat imprimatur that
Somebody missed
maybe
some
question,
stuff.
maybe them is whatever. But the way that process works is that's not supposed to happen, right? You don't have that with YouTube videos. So as Mike was saying, right, you can't check that. You can say, okay, this is a priest. Okay,
That doesn't.
cool, right? I mean,
Oh, it's a guy with a white collar.
He looks official. Well, okay, that's great.
Official, okay.
In the same vein, it's funny. We were talking at RCA this past weekend about Vatican II, and what made Vatican II so unique is the fact that before that, if there was a council, usually you didn't know what happened to the council after it all went down. So in other words, when something was promulgated, that was it. Okay, that's must have been what happened. What people don't understand, though, is that in many of the councils, even back to the very first council in Jerusalem, there was debate. These group of bishops would look at a point and say, okay, well, here's our perspective, let's vote on it. Okay, then they go to the Holy Father and say, Pope, whoever it is, Pope Francis, here's what we hashed this out, here's what we decided, what do you think? He has the final say. He can say, yep, or you know what, I think you guys missed a point here, I think we need to change that. But here's what and then he goes and promulgates it. Most people were never privy to those debates.
Oh.
And some of them got very, very heated. Like, for instance, in Nicaea, there was a bishop from Myra who got very upset with this priest named Arius and punched him in the face. His name was Nicholas.
Oh, really?
He's Santa Claus. He punched a heretic at the Council of Nicaea.
Oh, my gosh.
No one knew about it until after it all went down. But you can't imagine, like, what made Vatican II so different was that you had the main three reporting systems there every day reporting what was going on in the store. So as they were discussing like things like women ordination, or maybe what maybe people experience same-sex attraction, how are they going to fit in the church? Or, can we maybe get rid of some of these aspects of the sexual life that we can like make it more open? Those will all be hashed out by the bishops. And it'll be reported day after day from these news outlets that was going on. So what you're experiencing on the news is, oh, wow, it looks like they're going to let women be ordained. It looks like they're going to maybe open up this whole thing about contraception. Wow. But then what came out was not that.
Yeah.
But that was part of the process. So we're saying like, usually ecumenical councils happen about once every 100 years. Well, if you look at the time frame, last one we had was about 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Looks like we might be due for one.
Yeah.
But can you imagine now with Facebook and live streaming and X,
would you keep that?
how would you do it?
Yeah.
Unless people understood this is how this works.
Yeah.
You're going to hear these things.
You have to do some education
Exactly
before
right.
it starts.
But you have to understand, and that's really what's going on with the synod right now. And then what gets people freaked out about the synod is like, well, the synod cannot change church teaching. It can't. It never could. It never will.
They can talk about
They
it.
can
and
talk about
discuss
the way
it.
how they implement church teaching into the life. That's what the synod is supposed to do, but they can't change it. But what you're seeing is the same thing happens at every synod. Well, hey, can we maybe look at like people who are remarried, and can we like allow them to have communion, and just this can be each, or can we this women deacon thing, can we talk about that again? Okay, fine, but it's not going to change anything.
You can visit the question,
Sure.
but it doesn't necessarily.
Sure. But when we live in this life of like, everything's put online, everyone's seeing this, but like the fruit of it is not going to be what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think that's when whenever we have a Vatican III or whenever, maybe we'll be, who knows, maybe the St. Louis Council. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What's going to happen online is not what's going to happen when it's actually promulgated. And that's what people need to understand.
Yeah.
That these things, this has happened from time immemorial. It's always been that way. But what you're seeing, what you're experiencing through these mediums, you have to wait and see what's actually given by the Holy Father.
Well, if I couldn't come here and ask you, I'd worry about it.
Yeah, I get it.
So it's okay that I ask you these
Of course,
questions.
of course. Because I don't think you're alone in that, Connie. I think there's many people like, oh, I can't believe Francis said that. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
for me, what I understand that he said is that homosexuality is a sin, but it's not a crime. And
Of
I
course.
totally get that.
Well, and I even go a step further. Homosexual acts are a sin, right? The experiencing same-sex attraction is not a sin. That's not a sin.
Being gay is not
to have an inclination, to have a temptation is not a sin.
No.
To indulge in that temptation, that inclination is,
Right.
provided you can't do it in an illicit way, right? So, just as it would be wrong for me to take a concubine, it'd be wrong for another two men to get together and try to engage in a marital act.
Right.
Same, right? Even though I may have an inclination to want to engage in that action because I'm a man. Sorry, people, I'm a man. That happens. I have that inclination, but I also am given the gift of intellect to control that inclination and direct it towards my proper end.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Same.
Same
Right?
thing, yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
So that kind of falls in that expression you'll hear: hate the sin, love the sin.
Love the sinner, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
don't
yeah.
prosecute.
And I mean, that is so. I mean, it can be cliche because we don't want to pigeonhole people into that understanding. That, but also because I mean, here's the thing: people can, I think, legitimately try. One of the most pivotal moments of my formation, I think, is we had a workshop at Kenrick where there were a lot of LGBTQ Catholics that were invited to give their experience. And the one thing that was so uplifting and gave a lot of solidarity is the fact that they were striving to live a celibate lifestyle just like me.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Just like me. And now, different inclination, right?
But
different desire, but still, they were trying, they were striving.
Yeah.
And they weren't promoting a lifestyle that was contrary to it. I find that was very moving for me. And I found a lot of solidarity with them in that. Right?
I get it.
So I think that's what we have to understand is people are people. And we try the best we can in the circumstance we find ourselves in.
just depends on. Some things are more difficult
Sure.
to deal with.
Oh, sure. Right.
And part of that's just because I think the whole question of homosexuality is just hard for people to
Oh,
deal
for
with.
sure it is.
No
Well,
matter- no
it's
matter
become
where
such a normalized thing in society today that it really is. It's not really brought up anymore.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say that look, people experience things. We're not going to say that's sinful.
Yeah.
But if you engage in the action, well, yeah, that would be sinful.
Yeah.
Or at least some immoral action. Sinfulness is always subjective, right? So we always have to be very careful about our language for sure. But yeah, I mean, but when these things are said, I think it's just important to, like Mike was saying, it's like these things don't have an imprimatur, they don't have a neo lapsat. You have to take it with a grain of salt, and recognize that the only thing I really care about what the Pope says is when he actually writes it down and signs it. That's the only thing I'm really worried about. So
that's what it pertains to.
That's what it pertains to me, and I actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, hey, go nuts. It's crazy, right?
it's not written down.
Oh, I know he might be a Cubs fan.
Yeah. If you come out and said, if you wrote down tomorrow, every Catholic good faith must root for the Cubs. We'll have a problem.
We're gonna have
We'll have a problem. But I could also argue that's not a matter of faith and morals, so hey, it's not infallible.
It just
Great.
means you.
That's right. It means you're misguided. Sorry about that. Okay, good. All right, well, thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you
Oh,
for
I think
having
we're,
us.
no, of course, I think, so, we are going to have a Friends, Food, and Faith on election night, which is
Oh, really?
November 5th. That's the first Tuesday.
Oh, it is first Tuesday.
Now, usually in those circumstances, if no one shows, I just tape something, put on the internet anyway. I understand if people can't make it, that's cool. I'll still do something. But I think we're going to talk about funeral rites and why does the church do what she does and believe in what she does when it comes to the end things.
Cool. Okay.
Like heaven, hell,
Interesting.
purgatory. That kind
You
of
know,
Yeah.
you might put that in the bulletin.
Okay.
And
That's the
put,
specific topic.
You know, a
because
topic for that night. People might, I would find that fascinating.
Okay.
I'll be
I don't-
here.
I think election night's going to go on for a long time. I
Yeah,
don't know.
right, for a month.
I don't know that sitting in.
I think I can make an hour and a half here for fun and then go.
They're going to
watch
come on
that.
TV and right away they're going to tell you the 36 states that are already
That's
decided.
Right.
Yeah.
By 1%, we've already decided.
It can either be over in 5 minutes or
I mean,
15 days. One of the
it
two.
is turned into such a-
15 days is
Yeah.
short. I think it'll go further.
Oh,
I remember 30 years ago when it was truly something. Yeah, we used to have people over and have a big to-do about it.
Yeah.
And it was because there was surprises. Now there's so much information and
Oh,
so
yeah.
much calculation that they've gotten pretty darn good at
I will say the
calculating.
last 2 elections have been very surprising.
Well,
for sure.
it's,
Yeah.
it's going to be a,
All right.
yeah. So,
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.